So look at Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride, baby! Yeah! What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Detroit Lions video. Now, the Detroit Lions undoubtedly got better through the 2023 offseason. Through the NFL draft and the NFL free agency, the Detroit Lions added a lot of talent, including Cam Sutton, Emmanuel Mosley, David Montgomery. They added to the linebacking core, to the running back room, to the receivers, and pretty much every area of this team, and improved the depth, they improved the quality, and improved the level of play at just about every single position this offseason. And of course, those new players are going to get a lot of the media attention, right? Those players are going to get the pictures at OTAs. They're going to get the high priority interviews. They're going to get the special treatment from the Detroit Lions media because they're the new flashy thing, and everybody wants to know about the new guys. But that unfortunately leaves a lot of veterans kind of thrown under the bus, right? It leaves a lot of veterans that have been with the team for a number of years just kind of forgotten and falling into the background as afterthoughts. And today, I wanted to shine a light on those players that have been with the Detroit Lions for a number of years, players that have contributed to the Detroit Lions for a number of years, and guys that are just starting to fall under the radar, fall into that category of kind of being an afterthought on this roster, despite being players that I would almost guarantee are locks to make this roster and impact the team in 2023. So with that being said, the first player I want to talk about is Craig Reynolds. Now, Craig Reynolds was the RB3 for the Detroit Lions in 2021 after having a standout preseason versus the Buffalo Bills in particular, and really being the Detroit Lions' primary third running back in change of pace back in the 2021 season. Now, Craig Reynolds didn't play very much early in the year, but once injuries arose, once DeAndre Swift started to kind of have an injury bug hit, Craig Reynolds came in and in his second ever game rushed for over 800 yards versus the Denver Broncos after a really good start versus the Arizona Cardinals, where he had 11 carries for 83 yards. Throughout his 2 years in Detroit, he's averaged over 4.3 yards per carry and has been a really solid RB3 for the Detroit Lions when they've had to rely on that guy. Now, unfortunately, last season, Craig Reynolds missed a majority of the year with injury, and that led the Detroit Lions, obviously, to go and lean more heavily on Justin Jackson as the RB3, who also played very well. And on top of that, obviously, DeAndre Swift's fast start, as well as Jamal Williams breaking the single-season touchdown record, didn't leave a lot of people still thinking about Craig Reynolds, right? The RB core was a really good one last year for the Detroit Lions. They had over 1,000-yard rusher. They had a really good backup. They had a record-breaking season by one of the running backs, and Craig Reynolds kind of fell into an afterthought. Now, going into the 2023 offseason, the Detroit Lions upgraded their running back core, right? They signed David Montgomery to a massive deal. They drafted Jahmyr Gibbs with the 12th overall pick, and they even signed the Big Ten's leading rusher, Muhammad Ibrahim, as an undrafted free agent. And a lot of people are excited about those guys. A lot of people are excited to see David Montgomery be the lead back. They're excited to see what Jahmyr Gibbs can do in the passing game as well as the rushing attack. And they're excited to see what Muhammad Ibrahim, again, the Big Ten's leading rusher, can do as a potential RB3 or 4. And they're kind of forgetting about Craig Reynolds, a player that just is continuing to defy the odds on the Detroit Lions roster, a player that the coaching staff absolutely loves, and a player that I don't think is going anywhere from the Detroit Lions anytime soon. Now, the next player that I want to talk about on this roster is going to be Brock Wright, a player that was actually a starter in 2022. After TJ Hawkinson left for the Minnesota Vikings, Brock Wright became the primary tight end and the primary security blanket for Jared Goff in the 2022 season. And despite having just 216 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns, he was arguably the best tight end on the Detroit Lions roster. And on top of being a solid security blanket, a solid a solid threat in the receiving game, he's also a really good blocker and is just kind of one of those Dan Campbell guys, came out of UDFA, is defying the odds, and not only started in 2022, but in my opinion, played very well in 2022 and even in 2021 as an undrafted rookie free agent. Now, Brock Wright, kind of like Craig Reynolds, has kind of fallen out of the team's spotlight as they drafted James Mitchell a season ago in the 5th round to kind of be that vertical threat tight end. And then, of course, this season they went out and they drafted Sam Laporta with the 34th overall pick to again come in and be that flashy receiver tight end, be the guy that gets 50, 60, 70 targets a season and could potentially put up 1,000 yards at the tight end position. And with two players that are looked at as vertical threats, two players that are looked at as potential top receiving options at tight end in the NFL at some point in their career. Brock Wright, the blocking tight end, Brock Wright, the security blanket, Brock Wright, the guy that picks up 3 to 4 yards at a time on crucial third downs or goal line situations, kind of isn't talked about as much, despite likely not only making the roster, but probably starting the season as tight end 1 and being that guy that Jared Goff trusts, being the guy that Jared Goff has chemistry with, and being the guy that Jared Goff continues to go through on crucial downs and crucial situations, because we know Brock Wright has strong hands. We know he's going to come up in big situations, and we know that Brock Wright is just going to be that guy when it matters the most. Now, I do think that all three tight ends are going to have a big role this season. I think that Sam Laporta could end up seeing the most snaps, could end up seeing the most targets. I think that James Mitchell could be a really good tight end too, potentially see 30 to 40 targets and probably get maybe 300, 400 yards on the season as a tight end too. But Brock Wright's going to get his time, and Brock Wright is going to continue to be a really good tight end for the Detroit Lions, even if he's not a very flashy tight end for the Detroit Lions. Moving on to the third player on this list, we're going to talk about Halapaloe Vaitai, the starting right guard of the Detroit Lions. The Big V missed all of 2022. He had a back problem and really was able to play through the preseason, but I believe in the final game really just couldn't finish the game and really wasn't feeling very good about it. So he went into the 2022 season and had back surgery. He missed the entirety of 2022 as the Detroit Lions had a rotating door at right guard. The Detroit Lions offensive line was still very good. They still had a very good season. Obviously, they had allowed the fewest sacks in the NFL. They allowed the fewest turnovers in the NFL. They allowed the most rushing touchdowns in the NFL. But that right guard position was a question mark for a majority of the season. And I think people really forgot how impactful and how good Halapaloe Vaitai was for this Detroit Lions team in 2021. Just to give you kind of a spectrum of where he was in 2021, Big V not only played at a Pro Bowl level, I would argue played as a top 5 guard in the NFL, playing 953 snaps at the right guard position for the Detroit Lions in 2021. Big V was flagged for just 3 penalties that season and gave up 0 sacks after changing positions and playing his first ever season at right guard. He's a phenomenal run blocker. Him, Penei Sewell, and Frank Ragnow have a really good unspoken chemistry on that offensive line, and Big V is just a massive human being who is a phenomenal right guard for the Detroit Lions. And last season, and ever since actually switching positions to guard, has never allowed a sack in his NFL career, despite changing positions 5 years into the NFL. He is an incredibly talented player, is a devastating run blocker, and a really good pass blocker for the Detroit Lions, who is now answering questions about who should that right guard position be. Now, Big V has kind of been overshadowed as the Detroit Lions did bring in Graham Glasgow, a player that has started at right guard in the league before and has center guard versatility. But make no mistake, they did not bring in Graham Glasgow to be a starter. They did not bring in Graham Glasgow to push Big V for a job. They brought him in as insurance. They brought him in to be the backup. They brought him in so that if injuries do arise, if Frank Ragnow does miss some time, if Big V does miss some time, if Jonah Jackson misses a little bit of time, they have a starting caliber player to slide in that role and continue to be an elite offensive line. But Big V is the starting right guard. Big V is the final piece of that offensive line. And in 2023, it will help make the Detroit Lions not just a top 5 offensive line in the NFL, but potentially the best offensive line in the NFL in 2023. Now, moving on to the fourth player on this list, Ifeatu Melifonwu is a player that never gets talked about, a player that has been one of my personal favorites on the team for a long time, ever since being drafted in the third round of the 2021 NFL draft. And there's some reasons where he hasn't being talked about, right? The injury concerns are obviously there. He's played 17 games over his first 2 seasons, but in those 17 games has 5 passes defended, two fumble recoveries, as well as half a sack, while changing positions in his second season and having that versatility. Now, Ifeatu Melifonwu has struggled with injuries, right? That's the big reason I think a lot of people don't know how well Ifeatu Melifonwu actually plays on the field, is because he's not ever on the field and has not been regularly available for the Detroit Lions throughout his first 2 seasons of his NFL career. But when he's on the field, he's really good. As in his first 7 games at cornerback in the NFL, he looked like a true starting cornerback, even going up against Davante Adams and playing a really good game. Yeah, he got beat a couple times by the best wide receiver in football at the time, but he also battled back and had multiple passes defended versus the best wide receiver in football. He then moved to safety in his second year, had some durability issues, and wasn't quite able to make as big of an impact as he did at cornerback, but still had a really good game in his second start at safety versus the Chicago Bears, having a pass defended and playing really good football in both the pass game as well as in run support. Now, Dan Campbell has come out and said that Ifeatu Melifonwu could potentially play safety or cornerback this season. It's really going to depend where they need the help and where Ifeatu Melifonwu can make the biggest impact. But he has said that once Ifeatu is healthy and on the field, the Lions defense is better. Now, he's obviously been overshadowed this year by the signing of Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, the breakout of Kirby Joseph, the return of Tracy Walker, and the signings of both Cam Sutton and Emmanuel Mosley, as there's a lot of talent in the safety and cornerback rooms right now. But Ifeatu Melifonwu has outperformed all of these guys at OTAs and training camp. He's been the best secondary player at OTAs and at mandatory minicamp over the last month or so. And I do believe that Ifeatu Melifonwu, again, won't only make the team, but will find a way on the field. Being a versatile player, a 6'3" defensive back with range and arm length, he is a player that is going to be a chess piece in this defense. If he's healthy, I think will be a big part of the 2023 Detroit Lions defense. And if they want to move him back to cornerback, he can be a great boundary cornerback. If they want to keep him at safety, I think he can be a really good deep ranging free safety in a similar role that Kirby Joseph is. If you want to run 3 safety sets or 2 deep safety sets, Ifeatu Melifonwu can do that as a 6'3" safety with really, really good range. And I think the injuries has kind of limited him a little bit. I think the injuries have kind of set him back slightly in his NFL career, but he is such a talented football player and such a talented member of the secondary. I really think he can make a big impact in the 2023 season if he can stay on the field. The final player that I want to talk about today is Romeo Okwara, a player that has continued to been overlooked over the last couple of seasons as he hasn't been on the field very much. I think you're sensing a theme here, but in his last full healthy season in 2020, Romeo Okwara had 10 sacks, 31 pressures, 3 forced fumbles, and 18 quarterback hits. Now, he was off to kind of a slow start in the sacks category in 2021, as he had just 1 sack through 4 games, but was a really good player when it came to pressures and was a player that was consistently pressuring the quarterback over and over and over. Now, unfortunately, in week 4 of the 2021 season, Romeo Okwara ruptured his Achilles and was unable to return for the 2021 season and unable to return until week 14 of the 2022 season. However, in his final games of 2022, Romeo Okwara finished with 2 sacks in 6 games and actually looked to be pretty good, despite likely not being 100% ready to return to play and probably still taking a little bit of time to fully get back into the swing of being NFL conditioned as well as being at NFL strength. And of course, trusting your Achilles to not give out on you when planting, cutting, and rushing the passer. It's no surprise why Romeo Okwara has started to get overlooked, right? Aiden Hutchinson was the 2nd overall pick. James Houston was a diamond in the rough that had 8 sacks in 7 games. Charles Harris came in as a kind of low-level free agent and had 7.5 sacks as the Lions' best pass rusher in 2022, as well as John Kaminsky being a waiver wire pickup last season and being kind of the cog of the Detroit Lions defense in 2022. But Romeo Okwara is still a top pass rusher in this NFL. Romeo Okwara can still be a 10-sack player in the NFL, and I do believe he will start across from Aiden Hutchinson this season, despite James Houston's flash, despite Charles Harris' potential breakout again, despite John Kaminsky being a great team player and being an all-around good football player for this team. I think Romeo Okwara will beat out all of them in training camp, and I think he will start alongside Aiden Hutchinson and put up 7, 8, maybe even 9 to 10 sacks in the 2023 season now that he's fully healthy, fully recovered, and fully on his way back to being the pass rusher he was in 2022. So with all that being said, those are my 5 forgotten NFL players. Those are my 5 forgotten Detroit Lions that aren't getting very much love, aren't getting very much hype, aren't getting very much talk, but could very much heavily impact the 2023 Detroit Lions. Now, with all that being said, that's all I got for you guys today. Let me know down in the comments below how you feel about these 5 players in particular, as well as any other player that could potentially be flying under the radar this year on the 2023 Detroit Lions roster. I'd be very curious what you guys have to say and what players you are looking out for in 2023. But with all that being said, that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you all so much for watching. And until next time, and as always, go Lions!